And then we are missing TJ. He's out of town right now. Oh, and Councilmember Bodie, welcome. Excellent. Everybody's here. Okay. And my computer. Oh, sleep. I don't have the agenda. Oh, hold on, please. My computer died and well, took my agenda with it. Okay, so call to order done. Does anyone want to read our land acknowledgement?
I have it.
Oh, excellent. Thanks,
Great.
Meredith.
We'd like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of a rich and diverse group of Native peoples who have called this area home for more than 10,000 years. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the descendants of these Native peoples who are still here today. In doing this, we aim to illuminate the longer history of this land we call home, our relationship to this history, and the heritage of those peoples whose ancestors lived here before the European American immigration that began in the 1800s.
Thank you. Okay, did everyone have a chance to look at the agenda? Can somebody bring it to the table for us?
Bring the current agenda to the table.
Excellent. Any amendments to it? Discussion about it? None. Seeing none. All those in favor of the agenda as published, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Excellent. Thanks. Okay, let's move on to our meeting minutes from last time. Has everyone had a chance to review them? Okay. Can somebody bring that to the table?
Motion to bring the last meeting minutes of August 17th to the table for discussion.
I'll second it. Great. Any comments, additions, edits?
So I wasn't here at the last meeting, but questions, but nothing about editing, nothing in regards to editing or just clarification questions. So should we save that for the actual conversation?
Not actually on our agenda. Or is it related to something we're discussing today?
Well, it's related to the RUE.
We took that up during our discussion.
What is, you're asking about something that happened to me or just the
What's
way?
the clarification about what did happen? Yes.
Oh, yeah, why don't we do that when we get to the.
Okay.
old business?
Okay, great. Okay, any other comments or edits to the minutes?
I got some typos.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for that. Anything else? Anything from you, Ashton or Walter? All right.
My only question is, if I was not in attendance, do I vote on approving the minutes?
Yeah, you do.
Oh,
Yes.
okay, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as published, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. All right, moving on. Let's see, next meeting date, as per usual, if you won't be able to join us, please let Steve and I know as quickly as you can, so we can make sure we have a quorum. What public hearings is the new item on our agenda?
Oh, this is just a template. Our administrative staff is using, so.
So we would just
take it
say
off.
no, just like in
Yeah.
past ones. Okay.
We'll take it off next.
All right. And then citizen comments. We recall that we do have, let's see, oh yes, it's on that. We do have, for anybody joining us online or in the room, we have comments available at the beginning and end of our meeting. So if you'd rather listen to the discussion and then comment, great. If you'd rather comment and then get out of here, that's fine too. Or you can comment at the beginning and end. You have many choices. So with that, is there anybody here or online that would like to comment to our group?
Use the raise your hand feature if you'd like to comment.
Analog or digital?
The three of us are trying together. Yeah. So does that mean I get 9 minutes?
Technically, I suppose.
Sure.
Do you want to comment now or at the end?
How about now and then possibly at the end?
Okay, sounds great.
So I'm Sally, y'all were talking, and my
Wait,
whole-
Sally,
right
would you be willing to come maybe stand right about here and that way our other callers?
okay.
Thank you so much.
So I'm Sally Yamasaki, daughter Hoffman, my employer, all community members in Lake Park. I just want to first thank everybody in this room because I know personally as a citizen, the fact that you guys are here looking.
Excuse me, can you move the microphone closer? Because those of us on Zoom can't hear. And you may need to move the microphone to whoever's speaking.
Just stand right where you are.
Okay,
Just speak.
So I just want to thank you all. Let's look at your eye contact, because as a citizen, I feel like you're protecting all the things we don't understand. And just want to express my appreciation for all your work. So a group of us have been meeting, not just us three, but it's been about 15 people that have been meeting for 3 years. And I think we met with you early on in the stages and all that's been happening. Yeah, you remember that? It's about, and it was about Community Land Trust. And so today we're here to talk about it. I think, Donna, do you want to add something to this a little bit?
Well,
How we,
Yeah, we all see the need in Lake Forest Park. Obviously, we see the need in Lake Forest Park for unique solutions to problems. And we know that there's a lot of residents that that are upset, their kids can't live here. More and more seniors, there's no place for them to go, as well as that whole middle housing issue we've been discussing and looking at, like I know all of you have been to. So we are planning to meet and present to the city council in December, we hope. And then maybe they'll work on something in January if they like our ideas. And we thought we'd come here today and just give you a brief intro so that you're aware of it. And if you have any questions or interests in us coming back and telling you more about it, we can do that. But we think it's a really exciting opportunity.
and the other part too, it's an opportunity, community land trust is an opportunity that really fits into our community because it utilizes teachers, having social workers, people who we now see because our community is gentrifying, not being able to live in here. So it's, I think, a concern that's something that our community actually will really embrace. Michael's going to talk about a little bit the nuts and bolts of it and some of the issues that we saw within the ordinance that was recently passed.
Thank you, Sally. My professional career was spent running the Rainier Club in downtown Seattle. So I first got interested in the issue of housing related to the homelessness problem we were experiencing downtown. But as part of that, I learned about community land trusts. And have you heard of community land trusts before? Yeah, great. So we were thinking as a group of forming one, and we found that to be formidable to start your own nonprofit and staff it and get it to go. So we conceptualized aligning with another CLT and Homestead Community Land Trust located in Seattle. Is a 30-year organization that actually has a home in Lake Forest Park that's part of this land trust. And the value of this, for those of you that don't know much about it, is the nonprofit is able to acquire or receive donations of property to where they will put that in trust, for 99 years, keep the cost of the land negligible to a homeowner. Meaning they'll take care of that, so that just simply the cost of the house is what individuals making 80% of the area median income would then have to finance. They assist in helping, educating and the people about home ownership, getting financing. And what this does is it becomes an entry vehicle for people to actually create generational wealth and achieve equity in the house, while some proceeds go back to the community land trust at the sale. That's just to simply make it possible for those individuals to be able to take equity and go buy a home and have the land trust then be able to offer that. The sweet spot right now is if you can sell a house for $300,000 or $400,000, people can make that math work. So knowing that we've actually found people within our community that are looking for opportunities to donate their homes, we just thought that this was a great vehicle to get to happen. So we were excited by seeing the most recent multi-residential ordinance that was doing similar work for creating housing. NUSA, an organization, North
Urban.
Urban, yeah, Service Association, ran a 5-city program a few months ago where we all zoomed and learned what housing is being built in all these cities. But the number one message was, we just need housing of all types, of all, different price schedules. So we're excited to see that our city had created, the 4 zones where that kind of where we could develop. And we think a community land trust could fit really well into that. If a couple of small amendments made, their mission aligned with the way the ordinance was written. So that's really the crux of what we're hoping to make clear than this fast message that we're delivering here today, just to sort of get it in front of everybody to consider. And if you have any questions, we're happy to come back. In fact, we'd love to show you the presentation too and get your feedback before we try to go to the council.
I'm gonna just pass this book around too, if you haven't seen it. It's a fabulous book.
Can we put this in the meeting minutes? I have a question. Are you guys facing hurdles at the moment? Is that it?
Are we facing
Hurdles,
In
yeah,
what sense?
in the sense of, I guess, in terms of the.
Establishing the
ordinances or-
nonprofit?
No, no, no.
Or you said about
ordinance.
You said something about the
So,
ordinance.
yeah, did you wanna
That
do-
was some issue.
Were there-
No, the only one that I can plainly see is in the ordinance. The city has done a great job in making sure that developers stay consistent with the tax exemption that they receive for 8 or 12 years based on what kind of occupants in there. In the language of the ordinance, it says that should an individual's income level go beyond those thresholds, then they must transition. In the community land trust, they work really hard to get an individual into the residence. And if that should change over the course of time, that doesn't mean they have to leave right now, but when they do leave, it's going to be filled with yet another individual that meets that need. So if there was an accommodation that could be made, it would be for properties that are community land trusts within those areas, wouldn't have to exit. Is one example.
Because you wouldn't want a negative incentive for people to not increase
No.
their income.
Right. Yeah, yeah,
In fact, in the
because
model, even though they have a 99-year lease, usually in 7 years, people are able to buy their own house and gain equity, family equity, generational equity that a lot of people can't have. In 7 years, they can buy a house at cost. So the model is something that would sustain and bring in diversity for our community forever.
yeah, the missing middle, the staff we're trying to hire for the city, the police, the fire department, the teachers, I mean, that's,
And people's own children that don't make
yeah.
Google salaries.
I'm thinking that we can, maybe talk, should we have it now or can we pick that up later? I would be interested in making a proposal that, we allow them back to present as sort of a trial run, the presentation that they want to make to council, and we would be glad to serve as like
Oh,
a mock audience and ask
That's
questions.
exactly.
Is that something that you guys would be interested in seeing on one of our agendas, is a chance to have a formal presentation and some Q&A? Let's do that.
People.
Is that okay with you, Ashton and Walter? Okay. Okay.
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Did you say the title of this book was?
It's
Uh,
called,
Oh, thank you, thank you.
it's housing.
Health problem. Thank you.
And obviously,
Yeah.
feel free to reach out to any one of us privately if you want to talk or
Maybe
you know, like,
yours.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Glad
Can
to-
you restate the name again? I heard a lot of voices.
Housing is a homelessness problem. It was,
Housing is a homelessness problem. Thank you.
So they cite a lot of situations right here in the. Northwest.
Excellent.
And they've brought together a lot of data that's out there.
Yeah.
That nobody's brought together. in one
Right.
place.
Thank you for bringing this
Yes.
to us. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. Would love to
Yeah.
chat with you guys about it at any time.
Wonderful.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments online or otherwise? Okay, seeing none, I will move us on in our agenda and again, we welcome comments at the end as well. Okay, so that brings us to you, Councilmember Bodie.
Excuse me, sorry about that. I have two computer screens going here. There isn't really much to update you on. At some point, perhaps in October, Chair Larson will be invited to make a presentation on the sign ordinance recommendations to the council. But the council will probably not take that issue up for further discussion until after the budget is adopted. So we are currently in a pretty intense schedule of reviewing the proposed biennial budget for 23 and 24. So that's a lot of what's going on right now and occupying a lot of the discussion space. But there will be an opportunity probably at one of the mid-October council meetings to make a presentation on the sign code updates. The council is also looking at reducing speed limits and especially looking at some ways that we could improve safety by having a uniformly low speed limit on all our residential streets and perhaps lowering the speed limits on some of our internal arterials. And then even more trying to get DOT to lower the speed limits on Bothell Way. So those are discussions that are also being postponed, but are active topics with the council. So a lot is going on, primarily budget, some discussion of safety and speed limits, but in the meantime, definitely we want to at least have the first touch on the sign ordinance before we adopt the budget. So sorry if that is a little disjointed. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Question. Walter or Ashton, do you have any questions of Councilmember Bodie?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So if you're talking about safety, are you going to be revisiting the whole sidewalk issue as well? I know that tried to get something passed last year and it didn't pass in terms of, like creating a bond for that.
Yes, we are. One of the things we're looking at, because the city revenues are flat, but the costs of all services and supplies are up and salaries are up because of inflation. So we are looking at different things that we can do. But honestly, for things like sidewalks right now, we don't really have a funding source. So we apply to whatever grants that happen to catch our eye. But right now we have not. That's a possible topic. And if you want to come to one of the discussions and the public meeting components of the budget discussions, that would be great. But right now, no one is looking at kind of repeating a different version of the Safe Streets and Parks levy lift proposal. But there could be some other things that we look at. One of the items that came out of the council's retreat was the possibility of some kind of consumer price index adjustment. We haven't raised our property taxes in 20 years, more than 20 years as far as we know, and we're capped at no more than 1% aggregate from 1 year to the next. So we're looking at some possibility, and this would have to be approved by the voters, of adding a consumer price index adjustment to that 1%. But again, that would have to be proposed and passed by the voters before that could occur. We're definitely looking at a tight budget because of the current inflation and economic conditions and supply chain issues. It's kind of a grim situation. So don't expect any funding for a sidewalk soon unless unless we could get a grant for it, basically. So we are trying again for the sidewalks near the schools, because there are funding programs for that. So we've been turned down in the past, but we are trying again for those. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Bodie, as part of the speed limit discussion, are you also including in that stop signs, which I would think would go through the same authorizing body?
Yes, we would have to have new signage. There are other traffic calming things that don't cost much money that we would be looking at. And one of the things that, you know, the police department has raised is what about enforcement? And in general, I think other jurisdictions have found that when you lower the speed limit, a lot of people just drive 5 over the speed limit, no matter what it is. So it actually does reduce average speeds and accidents, even though you might not have really aggressive enforcement. So stay tuned for more. I'm sure there will be more public discussion of this before we take it forward. Oh, the other thing that we're looking at as part of the budget is the council has weighed in very strongly, and I have personally as well, on the fact that when we do our street overlays, which we do every year to kind of maintain our streets, let's do fewer overlays and make sure that we can where it's appropriate, have like a walkway, a designated walkway on the side of the road. And in some cases, we may even be able to have a little curb, which you've seen around the city some places. So I believe that they're looking at doing that next year for 35th. Which could benefit from that for sure. So that's something we've asked our public works director to make sure he incorporates into his planning for using the street overlay funds.
Yeah, they're redoing the overlay. There's an overlay project on 35th right now where I live. And I was thinking, could the city invest in like a stencil so that they can spray paint like pedestrians, like in the right of way, for example, as a cheap way to just demarcate. So, I mean, they're painting it right now. It looks really pretty, but if they could just get a stencil and paint a guy walking, like a stick figure walking or something in the right of way.
Yes, makes sense to me, and I'll pass that on. Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
But there's another, I think there might be another part of 35th then. I don't know which part is getting the street overlay next year, but they're actually going to have a protected walkway with a little curb on the side of it, as I understand it. But I'll pass that on since they're doing the painting now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, well, directly into old business, we need to review the edits to the code. We certainly want to answer your questions, David. We need to talk about whether or not we want to have a public hearing on this, and then also decide what edits are necessary for the cover letter to go with our recommendations to council. So I'm thinking we should start with maybe David's questions, because I think the edits are they look pretty straightforward to me and should go pretty quickly. So let's tackle your questions.
Okay. So mostly because over here, I'd like to know how these conversations ended.
Did you watch the recording? By the
I
way?
didn't. Would that help?
Well, I don't know. Let's see.
I mean, I know.
Yeah, what are your questions?
So if that would help, then I don't have to address these questions. So for instance, the conversation around specific restrictions of critical area tracks could be better defined in the current code. And Chair Larson was suggesting that the staff draft language be included in critical area tracks. Was that followed through on?
Can you give me a?
Where are we?
That's page 3, beginning. Well, the paragraph begins on line 9.
Okay.
And ends at 21.
Yeah, we talked about the possibility of turning the buffer areas into conservation easements, and I think anybody else would be welcome to comment on it, but my understanding was that there was at least one person who thought it was a burden to the developer. And does anybody recall, we dropped it?
You dropped it. I think we did this problem.
Was that something, was there any rationale of why we should require the buffer area to be in conservation? I know we talked at length, and I felt very strongly about it, that if we really did intend those to stay as buffers, why not have them at conservation easement in case code changed farther down the line, freeing up the rest of the property for use other than being prescribed today, but I don't remember if there was a reason why.
Well, so I remember the conversation, it was, the Councilmember Bodie weighed in as well, that, you know, the conservation easement is maybe just an unnecessary layer, of what the city already does, but requires the permittee to record tracks on, you know, that run with the property, say the track A and track B are critical areas and are not supposed to be developed. They protect against being subdivided further as well. So I think that was the consensus, that maybe there wasn't really more to do in terms of, you know, conservation easement is maybe not the right vehicle to further protect them.
I think that was the end thing, is that it felt redundant to what was already happening.
Okay.
I mean, I'm still a believer in them. We did that at my work, and we tied it up because we know that as policies change farther down the line, without a conservation easement, it could be undone 20 years from now.
Yeah.
But I think that the thought today was that it was redundant.
Okay. Okay, and that was the consensus of the.
Feels like it. Does anyone
Okay.
want to weigh in on that differently, or?
No, I think you're right.
No, I wouldn't mind having them.
I would love to have them. Yeah, I would love.
Is it different also because we're talking about private property and we're, you know, kind of, this is the whole process of this is sort of working with the property owner and having, so I don't know if that makes it a
I
different.
think it's more like horse
scenario.
trading right now. By state law, they're allowed to have reasonable economic use for their property, but are required to maintain certain areas undeveloped and as buffers and maintained as native space, and mitigation is typically happening on those spots. And so I had brought it up personally because I think it's a way to preserve those areas in perpetuity, regardless of policy changes farther down the line. But it didn't feel like there was a strong appetite from a majority of commissioners, and so it didn't make its way into any of our recommendation statement. But if we felt strongly about that, we could add it to our memo as something for the council to consider, or something like that.
The code actually already refers to it as conservation easements and critical area tracks. So the code sees them as kind of the same thing. It's a very broad term. It means different things in different contexts. And some, you know, conservation easement could protect things other than critical areas. It could just be a native growth area that isn't a critical area, and that could apply, you know, as a private person or institution, so that you could establish a conservation easement themselves, not much of the land, and the city doesn't have anything to do with it. But when we say a critical area tract, we're saying, all right, you know, you've got your little piece of developable land, everything else from here on out has to remain natural. You can't you know, build a pickleball court in your, which sits a very trap.
Any of us have the right to do it to our own property right now. We could all work with. Yeah.
Even if that's on a critical amount, that just begs up the
It
question,
doesn't
even if
have
it's
to
a
be a
critical
critical
area.
area. It could be, you could just say, I feel very strongly that my property should have this area undeveloped in perpetuity. How it affects the value of your land is, that impacts you, but you are legally allowed to put any of your property into a conservation easement at any time.
Right.
My thought was just that while we're horse trading on that reasonable economic use, it would be a way to preserve those tracts of perpetuity. But again, Councilmember Bodie, I don't think felt real strongly about that. And so I think we just sort of dropped it.
Okay, so just as a process question, then to complete that conversation, and my questions are related to, it's the same kind of question, right? Basically it's a process question. So it seems that there wasn't enough energy around addressing that, and so therefore, if as a group, if we decide to actually address something in the code, then we will follow up with
I
recommendation.
don't think there's even enough of an appetite to develop language as a recommendation. I think probably the most we would have consensus around is putting something in our memo that says we'd also encourage you to look at.
Right.
That's probably, I mean, that's just my opinion based on listening to our conversation.
Yeah, is that accurate?
Would you like to champion that in our memo? And if so, when we start talking about the memo, we bring it up.
So the difference would be that we recommend this to code versus, I mean, what would be the language?
The language, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody at the table wants to develop language for section 16.16.25. I think the most that you might find support for around the table is making a recommendation on our memo to the council to consider implementing conservation easements as part of the horse trading in an RUE.
Okay, I will make a decision once we have that conversation.
Excellent. Did you have other questions?
No, I think that overall, I think that we need that.
Great, thanks so much. Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely. Did everyone have a chance to look at the edited document that Steve sent that capture our two primary recommendations, which are requesting a financial guarantee on the mitigation program and also about having the hearing examiners affirmative decision on an RUE recorded with the property.
So I still thought that H had awkward language, and maybe it's because I'm not quite understanding what they're getting at. So it says the hearing examiner's decision granting an exception shall be recorded against the real property. This is the awkward part, I feel, the subject of the decision with the King County Recorder's Office. I suggest adding doing this way instead, the hearing examiner's decision granting an exception and all mitigation agreements shall be recorded against the real property in question with the King County Recorder's Office. I don't know if I'm getting kind of at that.
Comments to that.
Well, I thought commas, no commas, and I went with no commas because, but yeah, because I just thought that the wording, I'm not quite sure what the subject of the decision, I'm not quite sure what that's referring to or getting at. Sure.
This looks like it at least needs, that is the subject of the decision.
Could you read your recommended?
So the hearing examiner's decision granting an exception, and I'm adding this, and all mitigation agreements, because I'm guessing that we want to add not only the fact that they got exemption, but also we want to document all of the mitigation documents shall be recorded against the real property in question with the King County Recorder's Office.
Walter and Ashton, did you hear that?
I did, and I just want to agree that I found the wording at H confusing myself, and so I'm glad that this has come up.
Do you like Meredith's recommendations, or did you have more that you wanted to add, or is different?
I think overall I agree with it. I think especially the first half of the statement, noting that the the language specifying about the mitigations of which I think maybe the second half could be just left at the real property rather than the property in question.
Okay, so
I think that's semantics, really. So
real property with King, yeah, that'd be good too.
Does anybody else have questions or comments, additions about this?
So glad you're here, Meredith. No, but I would agree. Yeah, I think that's clarifying.
Ira,
Yeah, I would agree.
David,
We're talking about H. right?
H, yeah.
I agree.
Melissa, me too. Ashton?
No, totally agree. I think that clarification really helps, and the mitigation is the crucial part in this piece. So I think that's a great add. Thanks.
Thanks, Meredith. Okay, does Meredith need to read that again or submit that in writing? Or did you just capture that?
We have a recording.
Well, I just did not, you wanted to grab it now later. All right, what about G? That was the other big change. Does it read in the way that you expected?
Yeah, point out there that I renumbered these, that there was a draft provision related to, like, that we had a previous G that deleted that the city attorney recommended against.
Right.
So this is just down to what the commission, after the most recent discussion, is still recommending. Not seeing all of your rehashing. G is reflecting the guarantee provision that we're gonna make sure that people who get a reasonable use exception not only get a contract for that mitigation monitoring, but also they put down a bond or set aside in a bank account that the city is named in to pay for that in case they walk away from getting to do it. The city could collect his bond.
Okay, so you say they get a contract. Where does this come? Is that from the city?
No, this is usually with a consultant. So,
Good, the
so
consultant.
we'll have like they'll contract with somebody who a biologist who goes out and says, yeah, the plantings look like they meet the plan. And then every year after that, for at least 5 years, the plantings are doing well or not doing well. Here's my recommended fix for those things. And so the city gets a copy of that report and says, hey, it's like you got kind of a B- here.
Yeah.
So then we'll look at the next year. Hopefully it's better.
So the contract can come from any of those individuals. It doesn't matter. what-
Anybody who is a qualified professional, qualified person to do that. That's asked.
And this landowner who puts up a bond and hires this sub-consultant to do this review, submit these reports, and you get them and you review them, but what if this guy turns his sub-consultant free and doesn't do that?
Well, that's
How-
what
how-
this addresses. Is that, the city can say, look, we want you to finish these reports. We've collected on this bond, or we have collected that, set aside this assignment of funds, and we would tell the consultant that they need to continue with this process.
Is that something you monitor? I mean, you get something that comes up. I'm curious as to the mechanism to make sure this works.
Well, the property owners is incentivized because they want their money back, right? And so one of the things we talked about also is just setting up some sort of, spreadsheet or something, or a group calendar in the planning department to make sure that all of the ongoing monitoring programs that we know from the at another point where there should be somebody to report. And then we're going to see if we can figure out a way just to actively send out a notice, hey, it's time for your 2022 report. Please make sure that gets done. It's an area that, definitely is.
How does it work now? I mean, that
It's been very kind of like the person who was related, part of the approval process follows up. And generally, in most cases, people have been, before we issued the permit, we've said, you need to show us you have a contract with the consultant. And so once we have to see that contract, then that person is usually involved with the property moving forward. So that's how I take the task. But now we've got a situation where the person just said, no, I don't want you to do it. So then they sold the house. And so it's trying to fix that situation.
So is that the problem it's trying to solve?
Yes, it's trying to add another layer of protection to make sure it's done.
I'll just add, I think the thing I'm wondering about it, interested in what the rest of you think, is that the problem it's trying to solve is that if a property owner isn't complying with mitigation plan, we don't have any recourse because they don't have any escrow, if you will, money in the bank. And what this is aiming, based on our earlier conversations, Steve had recommended this as a vehicle that's sometimes exercised, and we're just moving it into an always exercise, that there would be money in escrow, if you will, for a period of time. I know that's not the right term, but it's something that I can relate to. That's sitting there, and at the end of the term, the monitoring period, if you as the property owner complied with all the reporting and you know, your mitigation plan has been realized, then you would get that money back. But if at any point you're not compliant, then the city has money to do that. Now, I don't know legally how we are allowed to go onto the property or do that kind of thing. And so that's one thing I do wonder is how that part works.
Right. Once you establish a critical area chart, the city has the ability to go into.
Legal access to it. Okay. And so then the only thing that I'm wondering here is it too vague that the form of the financial security guarantee is decided ad hoc by the city, or should it always be one type of vehicle? And then what sort of counts as qualified professional, I suppose,
Well, there's a definition, qualified professional.
in the terms, okay,
And, you know, I think we use a more vague term because there's at least two ways to do that, through bond or this assignment of funds, which is the bank account, which is a lot more accessible to the average homeowner. Like, okay, I set a bank account with the city's name on it as well.
I see.
And versus having to figure out how it works with the bond company, we would rather work with the bank to money's there.
I just don't know all the options that are available, so I wasn't sure if it had.
There's
to
probably
change
more
or not.
options, but that's no reason to use the general term.
Any other questions or comments on the language in G, which is really just giving the city money to make sure that a mitigation plan happens?
Yeah, I have a question about how, I guess how it works in practice. Does the owner put up a set number of funds? Let's say that, you know, they've gone through this process and it's been determined that the cost is $20,000 for that performance and maintenance of the mitigation project over that period of time. Are they allowed to then bill against that? And over that 5 years, they can use that 20,000 to pay for that cost. And so at the end of it, it tends to zero. Anything that's left over, they would retain, or is it, they have to put up that number and it stays there in, you know, in escrow, and then they have to come up with another source of funds to actually pay for the maintenance. And then at the end of the period, they've paid out separately, and then they can kind of recollect a separate source of funds.
Yeah, initially they need to pay for it all upfront, but we certainly entertain, if you're into year 3 of it and you'd like to request to reduce the amount of the bond or the assignment of funds, we've done that on a number of occasions. It's just sort of, you know, initially it is sort of like you're double paying for it. But then you can later on, you can use those funds or reduce the bond.
Yeah, I read it like that too, that they're drawing from it, but what would happen if the cost exceeded the amount that was in this? Is there a vehicle to kind of?
Well, the language here says the cost of the financial guarantee should be subject to approval by the city based on qualified professionals, estimated costs of the labor, materials of the approved mitigation plan, plus a 30% contingency. So that's usually enough to you know, deal with inflation over that period.
Should we add language for the current market value of labor and materials and monitoring? So we're, you know, including funds for those annual reports.
Sure, that wouldn't hurt.
I like that. How does everyone else feel about that?
Mitigation, performance, monitoring, and maintenance.
No, you don't want more money.
Well, I'm not opposed to more money, but you know, who's gonna come up with a contract based upon old prices? I mean, your current is current. I mean, some guy's coming up with a,
Oh, no, I think the point was the monitoring, because you also have a cost with monitoring. Somebody's supposed to come out and.
But
take
that's the consultant that you hired.
Right.
He's gonna give you a fee to do it, and. I mean, he's gonna say, you know, I want $10,000 to do this over the next 5 years, and that's the agreement, and prices go up. The guy doesn't make quite as much money per hour, but. That's almost saying that his consultant can change his fees halfway through the
No,
project.
I think what it's saying is this, so right now, if I have a property that I'm getting permission to develop on. In exchange for building on a wetland, say, I have to come up with a mitigation plan that the hearing examiners, you know, we've all agreed that this is what I'll do in exchange for being able to build this house. That mitigation plan has costs, right? The native plants that are going into it, maintaining those each year, replacing them, you know, as prescribed. On top of that, as the property owner, I've also got to pay monitoring fees. And so, I think what's being proposed is that if the city has to take on the role of getting things planted or having the monitoring done because the property owner is not doing that, having the monitoring fees wrapped up in this, you know, quote unquote escrow type account would allow the city to cover monitoring costs as well as mitigation costs.
At a different rate. Than what you-
This is just an estimate that's developed at the beginning of the process.
It's a
And
draw.
I don't understand his term current. I mean, that's what-
Because I think maybe the confusion is that the plan at the beginning doesn't necessarily have to be implemented by that same person. So I could, as a homeowner, say, I myself will plant these grasses and ensure that they are healthy every year, and the consultant is just coming once a year and saying, yep, she's taking care of her grasses, yep, she's taking care
Or
of,
she
so
might
the,
hire a firm to do that.
right, I might, but I might not.
But we want to know what it would cost to hire somebody, because if the city's left only the bag, we'll be hiring somebody to do that mitigation.
So it's not like one person necessarily that's saying this is a 5-year commitment for this company to maintain the property. That-
It's just the term current.
I think it's just at the time of the hearing examiner, like, submit here's a quote of what it would cost to have a company come in and plant all these plants and set up all the.
Okay.
So, is that something we all want to add? I mean, based on Walter's.
I'm fine.
Yes, no, okay, Ashton, we have affirmative head nods in the room. Is that something you want to add, or do you want to make a case against it? Or do you want Walter to say it again?
You know, some of the against it in the room, I'm having a really hard time hearing. I don't want to jumping in and saying, sorry, I can't hear you. I heard Walter, but I didn't hear why the rationale against it.
There was only one small discussion against it, and Ira was concerned that we were asking for some sort of, I think, he was concerned about the word current, and then somehow, anyway, Meredith cleared it up. We don't have any folks in the room against Walter's recommendation.
Okay, yeah, I don't have an argument against it now.
Okay, how would you put language in for monitoring the term?
I was gonna suggest that just add monitoring, like comma monitoring after approved mitigation plan, comma monitoring, and then comma as well as 30% contingency. Does that work? Is that what you're trying to achieve, Walter?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Meredith and Walter, for helping us shore up the language. Are there any other comments? Steve's done a nice job of getting this down to one page. And this would serve as the document we would send to council. Is there anything else about the language on this page that we should discuss or change in any way?
Not so much about the language,
Okay,
but I am wondering, questioning. We spent a great deal of time talking about our UE, and this is our output. I'm just wondering, what's the impact that we're making? What's the problem that this is solving? And does it justify our spending time on our UE?
Does anyone else want to answer it first?
And I'm not criticizing.
Oh,
you, I'm
no,
just-
not at all, but I can share my understanding unless somebody else would like to take the stage.
I think if I heard you correctly, the question is this serving a purpose? Was this worthwhile of doing it? And I think when this was initially brought up to us, we read through the case and the issue at hand was that there was no teeth in the current language that was that allowed the person to continue with mitigation plans. And so non-compliance would continue and there was no recourse for it. And I think that was really the crux of the issue that we all had talked about. And so what we wanted to do is refine the language to put some kind of financial responsibility in there to ensure that people are going to follow through with mitigation. Furthermore, one of the issues that came out was, okay, well, what if somebody sells the property in the middle of a mitigation plan? New prospective buyers are not going to know this. They're not going to carry that out. So there was a gap. And so it wasn't going to be fulfilled. And so I think the two pieces that we talked about was now we're talking about bonds tying financial responsibility to mitigation. And then now also having it show up in the property, in the titling, that it really does aim to achieve the two biggest issues that we saw.
Well done, Ashton. I'll add to that what we also discovered are that other possible changes, and we entertained a lot of other options, were particularly without problems, like where we might be solving one issue, we may be creating another. So I think the other value in it is that we've gone through it and found that these are in fact the levers that we could pull that could solve some known problems, but there really wasn't much more we could do to this.
And I think the other thing I would just mention too, I think Meredith was key in this, is doing some research in what other cities are doing to address this particular issue. And so the bonds in particular, this was something that that other cities are doing, and this is not out of the realm, and this really does aim to achieve what one of those core issues were.
So we're succeeding in bringing teeth into this.
I think part of the other problem too, my understanding is that a homeowner or a property owner has the right to develop their property. It's not their fault that it's a critical area. And so, we have to come up with a way to mitigate their desire to develop their right to a piece of property that might be sensitive. So how do we do that? How do we comply with that? For me, that's why I go back to the subdivision issue. I know we didn't talk too much about it, but we have this comp plan that says we look at, I don't know if you remember, we looked at the zoning map and it says we have the ability, we have all these large lots that we can subdivide. And if you overlay, all these to meet the zoning requirement of that zone, and if you overlay the critical areas map on top of it, you're thinking, wow, there's a lot of critical areas. So, for me, there's a little inconsistency there as well. Like, on the one hand, the Growth Management Act, and we're talking middle house, the missing middle. We want this higher density development, but then here we have this other push and pull that says, well, then we have to subdivide it, and where do we bridge that gap? And I think I'm excited to talk about the comp plan coming up where we could possibly address this. So I shall table this idea, but yeah, I think that's kind of the tug of war that we've got.
And maybe we do lead this into that at the next conversation about the comp plan. My final question about this, though, we were addressing at the very beginning is, so these are recommendations for the city council. That's it. We're not willing to say, what would be the alternative that we would say? We are recommending that you so to say to the council, this is what, more than a recommendation, what would we say?
Well, that's what the planning commission is. It's a recommending body.
Right.
So you could strongly recommend.
But we were talking about at the beginning, like, what was the difference that we were talking about? What's the distinction? Is that just it? That it's recommendations and
It's just recommendations, and we can.
I think
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think the most strong way you can recommend is actually providing language and say, this is what we've discussed and have come to, broad consensus to recommending you adopt. The alternative is you say, we recommend you look into this code section. There was a lot of discussion on it. We didn't come to an agreement, but you should look into it.
Yeah.
And in this case, unlike some of the other work we've done, I think that we have consensus on these two key recommendations. So. I think I'm gonna move us along. I feel like, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, your comment about, somebody buys a piece of property and they have this right to develop this piece of property to an extent. But if they buy a piece of property that's already developed, then I don't think they can buy it. Clarify, if it's already gone through this exemption process and they can't build over there. I mean, it's just because somebody buys a piece of property and they're the new owners, I think that's why it's important to have this documentation there that they can see with the deed that they can't. So I just bought it. I want to develop it more. Well, no, it's right here. It's already been developed to its max. You can't, because if that's allowed, they're going to keep creeping. Pretty soon, it's nothing left.
Well, I think we also should delineate what you were talking about when you take our map and you overlay critical areas. A lot of properties, we've been working on the rules that apply to lots that are totally encumbered by critical area. There's not a part of the property that doesn't have critical area, because if there is a part of the property that doesn't have critical area, that's where Steve's department requires the property owner to build.
Yes.
But so it doesn't fall under an RUE, they just aren't allowed by the critical area ordinance.
But if you subdivide a large lot that is in a critical area, then suddenly you are looking at an RU. Suddenly this becomes correct.
That's actually the suggestion that Meredith made, and then define the language on addresses that as well. You can't, there's a bumpers against doing it in the subdivision code. You have to have 1,000 square feet of buildable land on any new lot you create. So if your lot is, if 3/4 of it are totally encumbered by critical areas and they're buffers, you can't just slice it up, and say, hey, now that I need a reasonable use on this. You already had to have that on each one of those lots you wanted to create. So Meredith's language of the hearing examiner shall grant an exception only if the inability to derive reasonable use is not the result of an action or actions taken by the applicant and property owner. So if for some reason, the same person somehow managed to subdivide, it's really hard to think of an example that they wouldn't be able to subdivide. But say they did. Show that a lot line adjustment that created this other lot now that has to get an RUE, then this prohibits the hearing examiner from approving if the case is made that was their own action, and they created an undevelopable lot, and now they're asking to develop it.
I think you're right. We should pick that up in the comp plan conversations, because I think we've done a really good job of staying tight on, just this section of the code.
No, I get that. Yeah, it's just because I'll be honest, I'm thinking about all these sites that are being developed right now, and somehow they got subdivided, even though clearly they are, so that's why.
They did. The first critical area regulations were adopted in the 90s, and they got much more teeth in the last 10 years or so. So it used to be there was a variance process in these critical areas ordinance, but the state said no, you can't have a variance process. What's the point of having this? You can just get a variance.
So as a commissioner, that makes me feel good. I just want to, I really see my role, because I look at, that's my role, is to really preserve this city, and not to say we take away development, but it's that balance, it's finding that balance. And, we've got all, and that's what I love about what we do, is that we have these discussions, but I'm going to still beat the drum to make sure that the critical area can be preserved. It's just that, yeah, so I agree. Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Okay, to move us along, unless there's anybody who says, wait, stop the presses, we need some more edits on this one pager. I'm going to move us along and put a question to you before we go into the memo, which is, as I was drafting a memo, I realized that I needed to get to that sentence where we said we've had a public hearing or we haven't. We realized we didn't talk about that last time, and so you have a draft memo that is without us having a hearing, but I think before we dive into the memo, I'd like to just hear from you all your opinion about whether or not we use our next part of our next meeting to have a public hearing on these two changes as a way to give the city council a chance to have a preview of what the community thinks about these two changes. Or if you're content to let them do their own hearing and us move right along to the next steps.
What would you yes for?
I vote the latter.
Which was,
Quick straw man poll, raise your hand if you would like to have a public hearing. Raise your hand if you would like to send our recommendations without a public hearing.
So I do think that this is a topic that requires kind of some education to really understand it. And that's why it's tough, because the you guys maybe would be good people to talk to, because it is sort of, we were like, oh, it's taking us a month to just figure out what in the world's happening. So maybe we could do in the newsletter or something, we could kind of prep the community of education so that then you don't have a lot of concerns that aren't exactly what's being addressed, or some sort of preventative measure to try to like educate people beforehand. I don't know. Or just leave it to the city council.
Okay, it seemed like there were maybe some people who abstained. Raise your hand if you're in favor of recommendations without a public hearing. I just want to see how much of an appetite. No public hearing, raise your hand.
I sort of don't care either way.
Okay, you don't care. Ashton, do you care if we have a public hearing or not for these two recommendations?
I was gonna say, I could go either way. For someone that feels strongly about not having a public hearing, can you share your rationale behind that?
Yeah, it will go through a public hearing process, and I think the point of this is to give the city teeth to be able to manage this better. What I don't want is, I'm thinking, I know you guys are understaffed right now too. What I don't want is to generate a lot of phone calls and when it will have to go through public hearing process with the city council anyways. But,
Perfect.
And in the back, I think there were a total of 6 in the last, how many years? I mean, really, the question is this good use of our time? Yeah.
I changed my vote. I changed my vote. No public hearing.
Okay, Walter, and you said no public hearing too, right?
I did originally, but and then I sat out, but I mean, based off of Commissioner Lee's suggestion that, it will be discussed at the city council meeting for public hearing. I'm okay with kind of us sending this forward at that point.
Okay, great. And I will, I think, maybe follow up with, maybe Steve and I'll talk about having this maybe in one of our next newsletters so that it does get a little bit of light. Okay, moving on, watching our clock here, I'm still hopeful that we can get through our whole agenda.
Do we need to vote on this?
No.
No, okay, right.
This isn't a vote.
At some point, you need to vote on making the recommendation.
Okay,
You
but not
want
the
to make
hearing,
it-
right?
Huh?
But not the hearing, right?
Not the hearing, no, you don't need to go on the
Okay.
hearing.
So, yeah, so I think we've already actually had discussion on it, but yeah, does somebody want to bring a motion? I think it would look something like as published with edits as discussed or something.
Yeah, recommend these amendments as amended at this meeting to the council for recommended for adoption.
Ashton, do you want to take a stab at our motion?
On the motion to move forward with the language at hand.
Yeah, so we need to vote on these recommendations, but we need to include in them the edits that were discussed, as amendments as discussed today. And then we need to vote on it. So we need to bring it to the floor.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion that we move forward, or that, like to make a motion that we move forward with the edits as proposed, in this document here. I think I'm missing it here. Do you want me to restate everything that we're changing
No,
here?
I think something to the effect that, that we, would like to accept the, changes to section, 16.16.25, including edits as discussed at this meeting.
So moved. That not fly?
Can the chair bring him up?
I'll bring a motion, okay. I
You've got a motion, she-
Oh, yeah, which one, I'll second every one of them, but, I move to amend the changes to the, proposed draft, ordinance of 16.16.250 as discussed at today's meeting, particularly in sections G and H, or it's H.
I second that.
Excellent. Is there any further discussion on these recommendations? Seeing none, all those in favor of Lois's motion to accept these recommendations with the changes discussed tonight, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Excellent. Our recommendations pass. I'm going to take us right into the memo. I'm so sorry you got it late. Do we want to put it up and edit it together? And I'm still gunning on us having the time to jump into new business, which is the comp plan. So as a reminder, this memo goes with this edited one pager to the council. And this is just a draft. I took my best shot at having it reflect what I thought we all sort of generally sensed. I will say that one thing we haven't discussed as a group, but Steve and I were able to have a conversation about last week, were some concerns I had about enforcement. And so that's why we have the second paragraph that's stated, and that is that there isn't, it's unclear how prevalent or not it is, but on the one of the case properties that we looked at early on didn't have any reports filed, monitoring reports. So that's why those recommendations are coming in. And I wanted to acknowledge that we haven't had a chance to chew on that together or look at that report together or anything like that. So that's, if you want to talk about it, we can, but that's the backstory to that second paragraph. So has everyone had a chance to look at this letter? I know it got sent out late today.
I haven't.
Okay, can everybody just take a minute to read through this first part? Everybody see it okay? Can you signal with your hand if you need another minute to read? Okay, so I'd like to tackle this in the three parts that I've laid it out. One should be pretty quick unless you guys have some wordsmithing because it reflects our conversation tonight. The second one is, like I said, the enforcement piece that I just mentioned, and then the final one is as a privilege of chair, a final recommendation I wanted us to consider. Again, it's just a draft, so as we get to each of these sort of three sections, we can have a conversation about it. All right, so for the first paragraph and then the numbered items 1 and 2, are there any questions, comments, edits, issues?
I just had some edits on that.
Sure.
Still, there are a few significant changes we can make. I was thinking we could just kind of just shorten it up by saying these changes should ensure the adopted mitigation plans on these properties are devised by, and then requiring financial security, requiring, so it's just,
Okay, change it to requiring. Can you still figure out a way though to keep significant in there? Because I sure want to
Sure.
signal, I want to signal to the council that while there are just a few changes, to David's point, these are significant changes.
yeah.
Right, because
these
that-
are-
The sentence before that, you're saying there really isn't many ways that we can change this document, and then you're saying still, there are a few significant changes, right?
So these are significant changes. Yeah. These are significant changes.
So it would read to you, Lois, it would read based on a lot of inputs. There are a few changes we can make to have it that will have an impact. These significant changes instead of still.
Or
Yeah,
should be.
Can you just make a new paragraph, like, stop after community and go to the next line and then just say significant changes we can make?
Or something, just to clean up.
Could we just take
Yeah.
still off and put, there are, a few
Yeah.
as a new paragraph,
Yeah,
there
there is.
are a few significant changes we can make? Or however, or something.
Why I'm here.
I think like starting a new paragraph would make it, more prominent.
So a new paragraph and start with there and drop still.
If you wanted to make that prominent, then I
Okay.
would start.
The only
Oh.
reason I wouldn't do that is because it does, she's sort of building an argument that based on so starting with the, and our own discussions, she's kind of saying, and it appears that there are a few changes we can make. So sort of, you're sort of admitting that there's not very much that we can do here.
However, there.
And then the second sentence is sort of saying, but all, even though there aren't many changes, there are a couple changes we can make in this. We did.
I would add, however.
Instead of still,
Well, there are, however,
All right.
there are.
Yeah, that's.
That's
yeah,
better.
that is
You're not
just
supposed to
something.
start with Carl, right? I remember if you was teaching.
Okay.
like that. Along the way, don't start at the time. Okay, so there are, however, a few significant changes. we can make. All right, any other changes to that first paragraph or two items? Oh, Lois wanted to change required to require.
No, that read,
Oh.
that actually is,
Oh, okay.
has it, never mind, that answers that.
Walter or Ashton, any changes you want to make to that first paragraph or the two numbered items? And then we can resolve that comment. All right, what about the next paragraph? It was my attempt to capture a conversation Steve and I had that acknowledged the monitoring and enforcement on RUEs could be improved, and so we collaborated on this language. What, if any, discussion or comments, edits?
I'm not gonna edit, but like I said, I'm an engineer, but I think it's important that we have a procedure to make sure that this stuff is monitored and followed. I don't know how we go about doing that, but I think it's important because enough stuff can go wrong on its own without watching it, so. Watch pot never boil. I think we should have a way to make sure that this gets done. I don't know if that recommend they hire people or I don't know how we go about doing that, but I think it's something we can talk about.
I think one of the things that Steve acknowledged when we were talking about this is that they were going to look at some internal processes that they would use that would notify them of things that were due. Even basic, just calendar reminders, or like he said at the beginning, a spreadsheet, something that wouldn't matter if there were staff changes or not, there would be a calendared item in the department's calendaring system that would say, hey, these are the reports that are due at whatever particular time.
Yeah, there's even, I just know that like our piano tuner, every 6 months, just email goes to me that says, it's time to tune your piano, make an appointment, you know, so there might be something completely automated where you don't even have to.
The good news is if you don't tune your piano every 6 months to 7 months, you're gonna realize it's sounds. Whereas the building department's gonna not think, wow, this man looks really grumpy. I mean, unless they happen to drive by it.
I really like that paragraph. I think it gives a really good backdrop of, you know, the letter, the memo, backdrop of where we were coming from.
I do have a regret that we weren't able to put this together because and it may just be that internally it needs a lot more light. But I would have liked you guys to see the report that did exist, just so you learned that. So I think that maybe is something that could be shared or reviewed. I think it's important that we all know what those things look like and how to become more familiar with.
So what happens when reports aren't submitted, like talking about here in 2021, reports weren't submitted? I mean, is it like, oh, we forgot, so you send them out just late, make them catch up, or what happens if they're not?
We're
there?
gonna make them keep going. So we've got here's 1, and here's 3.
So year 2, it just wasn't there.
So we're just saying you're gonna complete your 5 years. So over 4, 5, 6, 7. We're reaching 5. Its first report actually was right as built, as planted.
Yes. And then year 2, there was.
So there was no year 1 and year 2. We got them same year to do year 3. And so now we'll just continue that process till we get to 5 years of reports.
Walter has his hand up.
Yes. So, yeah, I think this anecdote is really useful in kind of portraying, you know, why we're focusing on this. One thing I wanted to understand about this section is the sentence that says the completeness of that report is unclear. I think it's the second to last sentence. Is it the completeness of the report, or is it the validity of the report, or the contents or the findings that are not clear? Like, is it that we have doubt in how accurate the report is, or is it actually just seem like an unfinished report?
So the sad thing is and we can hold off on our recommendations if we want to pick this up together. I've only been able to view the report that was done this last April. And there were parts that were just copied and pasted from the original mitigation plan, and no effort was made to bring it into current tense. And there appeared to be some missing sections. I don't know, I'm not an expert, but I acknowledged in this piece, I didn't want our group to sign off on the fact that we had somehow reviewed reports or approved or felt the report was complete or said a certain thing when we hadn't actually reviewed them. And so I added that as a signal that our group hasn't taken that up. We don't know if that's complete. I'm the only one who's seen that, and I have a lot of questions, but I certainly don't want to hold us up to dig into something that I'm no expert in.
Yeah. So as based on that, I would propose changing that sentence to say the efficacy of that report is unclear.
Okay.
What about just striking it completely, because it really doesn't add to, I don't know if it adds.
Because just be concerned.
I think it under.
We're not taking it up, and so I'm concerned, and so I wanted to signal that we have concern. Hopefully the council will follow up to ensure that the city has the reports it needs and that those reports reflect the quality or standards that we want. We haven't been tasked to do report reviews. We were just asked to look at the processes, and so we can strike it, we can change the language. That's what this conversation is about.
Well, what if you just said that the planning commission is not in fact weighing in on the completeness or validity of the report? I mean,
Or just that we haven't reviewed any reports as a commission.
You're accepting the fact that the report was received. I wrote this paragraph, so I was just kind of laying things out. Here's what's happened. So I think the more it just says sticks to the facts, the less makes less value judgments. That's what I was trying to achieve, but,
Well, it did make it, the language you sent me said that it, the report said everything was fine and dandy, and I read the report and I didn't necessarily read that, so.
okay.
We
well,
could just put, that the planning commission did not, review or, evaluate reporting. At all on our
That's-
use, right?
That's actually.
That's a factual statement. We at no point reviewed, RUE reports.
That would be fair, and then the city council can get back to us, say, please review.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
but
that
that's
is,
not
I
our
just,
job, that's the, you know. the
Exactly,
Hearing commissioner. and-
exactly.
I think the spirit of this memorandum though is to basically give the, basically a signal to the council that here's this problem that we have, which is we don't have enough.
Yeah.
Monitor or teeth to bite into with this ordinance, and this is, I think it, I mean, if we struck it, I'm okay, because I think this paragraph.
If you take the sentence that says the completeness of that report is unclear and replace it with the planning commission did not review RUE reports. Or additionally, maybe as a transition.
Monitoring reports, right?
Did not review monitoring, RUE monitoring reports. I would say that would refer to RUE monitoring reports. And I might start this sentence with additionally. Okay. Are there any other changes or questions about this paragraph? All right,
Not this paragraph, just a comment
okay.
that
Oh, and Walter, I'll get to you next.
that comes about my questions about years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and year 2 didn't exist. In this reporting thing, or in this example we're going through. There's really no teeth in the fact that these guys have to come up with 5 reports, other than they're supposed to.
Following you.
Well, okay, so in this paragraph here, in the report, you had reports for year 1, but you didn't have reports for year 2. And you're gonna require that you have years 3, 4, and 5. There's no penalty for them not hiring this guy to come out for year 2.
Well, there wasn't a year 1, so there was that.
Okay, well, there wasn't a year 1, but then maybe it was 2, 3, 4, 5.
So the property closed and there was a mitigation plan that was accepted. And then after year 1, there was supposed to be a report that didn't happen. And after
Yes.
year 2, there wasn't. But 6 months after year 2 was due, we got one in April of 2022.
Fine,
Yeah.
but they still missed a year.
They did. So I guess we have to say, gee, I assume you're saying, what is the, how do you, what retribution is there for the city for them not carrying it out? And from the city's perspective, if they do carry it out, and after whatever it is, year 6 or year 7, the planting matches or exceeds what was needed, then the city is whole. We just want that.
Yes, but I guess the whole reason for having this plan all along is to make sure that it works and you don't come to a mess at year 5 and say, wow, I wish we caught it back here.
Well, that's why we want to develop this system.
Yeah, so my question is if it's a 7-year program and they're supposed to monitor it every year for 7 years, and at the end of 7 years, it either worked or didn't work, but they complied with everything and it looks great. Well, what if they don't do years 2 and 5, let's say? Well, maybe it goes to 9 years because they skipped 2. So there would be an incentive for them to do their reports every 2 years or every year because they don't want it to go beyond 7
Right,
years.
'cause they also have money that's tied up.
I understand that, but if you said, you skip a year, we're gonna make the mitigation plan go
And
for
that's
another
in
year.
the code. I can do that. I'm fine with it. I could let this, until they do their 5 years. we could go on.
Until 5 years or 5 reports, could be 7 years. To
It
get
could
your
be
5
7 years
If-
if that's part of the approval.
to get your 5 reports in, because they skipped years 2 and 4.
So, yeah, I don't understand what the question is.
I guess the code doesn't say that right now, though, right? It's,
It does say,
so you can extend it.
I can extend it.
Okay,
Well, also, this homeowner didn't have, because our recommendations haven't gone in yet. And so
Yes.
this homeowner didn't have the money set aside, and now everyone starting now will. So this won't happen again because of what we've done.
Okay, any other questions about the second paragraph? Thanks, Ira. Walter, you had your hand up.
That was a mistake. I forgot to lower it.
Okay. All right, Ashton, are you ready to move on, or did you want to comment before we do? Okay, all right, so the last one was finally, and this is in full disclosure, you know, I felt that after some comments that Nick had given us a couple of meetings ago, and what I understand in conversations with Steve, I understand Councilmember Bodie, we don't have any money, but I still think it's a way to signal to the council that that enforcement is critical, and that we would recommend that they find a way to support a staff member who could be here to help with enforcement and making sure reports come in and make sure you know, that the rules that we put in place as a city are enforced. And so if you guys disagree with it, that's cool. We can strike the whole paragraph, but it was one final recommendation I thought we could add to them all. So think about that for a second and comment. Councilmember Bodie?
Yes, if I could just briefly talk about some of the budget discussions. We were talking about the fact that our permit fees should cover our costs, and we don't raise them very frequently, or haven't. And we really should be more conscientious and make sure that we are recovering all our costs. So I don't know how enforcement fits into that, but it seems to me that enforcement is like, you know, having good online forms, and you know, it's part of the administration of the program that should get distributed across the charges. So I do think that it's not out of line to mention it, because we had a pretty robust discussion about our permit fees and how much of our costs we're recovering, and are we actually recovering proportionately more for small projects than for big projects. So this fits into that envelope, I think.
How does everyone else feel about that recommendation?
A good recommendation.
Do you want to change the language in any way?
For you,
Ashton, same question to you, and Walter.
No, I support the recommendation, and I appreciate your comments, Lori Bodie, about it being appropriate. Thank you.
Yeah, I have no comment.
Are you in support or abstaining, or?
Yeah, I'll abstain.
Okay. Okay, that brings us to the end of this memo. What's missing from this memo that you want added? Or edited in any way? This is sort of the discussion that will precede us adopting the memo. I'll give everyone a minute. Speak up if you have something on your mind.
just to clarify, that last significant work has gone into developing the code that shapes our city, and we need some effort on enforcement. Do you want to clarify again that that's in particular around environmentally, or around the critical areas?
Sure. Would you want to propose something and see if everyone?
I mean, that's what I do propose, because I think that it's part of the bigger picture that we're trying to.
Okay, so significant work has gone into developing the code that shapes our critical areas. And we need similar effort on enforcement of these same areas.
Yeah, it could be that way. Yeah.
Thoughts, opinions on that change? So we're looking at the last sentence of the paragraph on that page.
How about, Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That, we need similar effort on the enforcement of these regulations.
So that it refers back to the regulations, within those.
Significant work has gone into development code of the code that shapes our city. And we need similar effort to go into the enforcement of that code.
It doesn't say critical areas, but are you okay with?
Right, but I think it's gotta be,
Sure.
we're talking about particularly getting told, like, and, you know, there's a areas, so.
Yeah.
So long as that refers back.
With a show of hands, it's hands up if you accept Steve's recommendation.
Of that code, what we're adding.
He's typing it right now. Yeah. How does that look, Walter and Ashton?
That's fine.
No issues.
Everybody good with that? Right, any changes before we bring this up for a vote? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion on this memo?
Motion that we approve this memo with edits.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Yay, congratulations, you guys, good job. We did it. Okay, Councilmember Bodie, you now have 2 sets of recommendations to take to council. Let us know how we can be helpful.
You were faster than I thought on the RUE. So I will make sure I let Deputy Mayor French know that there are 2 topics and we can be pretty efficient. And then both of them, I think, warrant more discussion once we adopt the budget. So that works well, I think, for an initial presentation in October and then a more detailed discussion among the council members in, late November, early December, maybe even January. I don't know what the schedule is going to look like, but thank you so much for your hard work on this. This is such a difficult topic. It really is. And I think you've come up with some good improvements to recommend and some good thoughts for the council to take into consideration. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Bodie. Okay, I have a radical recommendation that we strike our new business today. I feel like we've done a lot and I would love to get started on this one. We're a little bit fresher than being in our last 25 minutes. Is that something that you might be agreeable to? Commissioners?
Number 10.
Motion to adjourn.
Well, not quite, but how would you guys feel about having the new business be the top of our agenda next time? Okay, does that work okay?
Yep.
Feels right. Do we need a motion for that? All right. Then moving along, do you have any reports or announcements? Director Bennett?
We have a signed offer from Riley Bush now for the assistant planner position. Asked about that. Now moving on to trying to find a new city artist. Next year we'll have more hours. So council is reviewing the increase from 24 to 30 hours a week for the artists. To make it more of a living wage kind of job.
Very good. And maybe one day we'll even have a livable housing. Okay, let's see, additional citizens comments. I can't see, is there anyone online with us?
There's one person.
Okay, we will open it up for citizen comments. Use the raise hand feature if you're online, and we have in the room. We'll start with Sally.
Okay, just because I'm citizen Sally here.
Really quick, can you guys hear Sally?
Lori, can you hear me? Yeah, or people can, okay. I just wanted to thank you. I don't think public hearings are any good unless you have education first. And as a citizen, to be honest, when I saw Rue, I thought it was a French street. So whenever you give your education, I hope you do it in a very simple way. So we then are able to give public comment. The other thing is, in listening to all this, at first it was like, God, how do you talk about, like, I've never seen myself on the planning commission. But I just hope that it reminds me of this whole process of enforcement made me think about, I remember a stop sign, right? I wanted to have a stop sign into place and someone said, well, if you have a stop sign, then we have to hire another policeman. Or else they'll just go through it and you know, it doesn't do good unless there's enforcement. So I think there is a very important aspect of enforcement. But then I also was just, again, and this is just citizen comment. I was listening to a report that said something was just fine and dandy, and it sounded like it's cutting and paste with long tense. I think that has to also have teeth in it as well. That if that policeman is enforcing, and I don't even know what it's, they have to have, the policeman has to have integrity that they're truly watching that stop sign and that the report is accurate to what they're seeing. So I just, my simple citizen way of approaching it, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Sally, do you have a website or anything like that
For simple Sally. No.
Well, yeah, you can laugh, yeah, like, yeah, you personally.
We don't. No, we don't have one. But you can talk to any one of us. And like you said, there are 15 more people who have been meeting for 3 years. And recently, we've even talked with stewardship about, because community land trusts can also have conservation land trusts built into them, which would be so appropriate for our city. And we did get into that with another land trust to look at what that is after that. So we can provide you with all that information when we present to you. We do have a plan.
Thank you.
It'll change.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna move. We have somebody. Thank you. We have somebody online. I can't see who, but somebody's raising their hand.
Hi, it's Randy Sabonga. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. I apologize in advance. I have a dog next to me who keeps peeping because she wants to play ball. So if you hear her in the background, please disregard. I'm sorry about that. I just want to express on behalf of the Stewardship Foundation our appreciation for the Planning Commission's evaluation of the current RUE code. And looking into the previous enforcement of the code, we wanted to try to educate ourselves about how the process has worked. And as a sort of a case study, we looked at the Johnson property because there were compliance issues, and it includes critical areas, streams and wetlands. And in fact, on the list that Mr. Bennett provided of the RUEs since, I think it's 2005, it's not 6, it's been 12 properties, and 9 of them, from what we can tell, involve sensitive and critical areas. So this is really an area of potential major impact on the good health of our environment in Lake Forest Park. So we looked at the Johnson property, and I filed a public records request asking for all documents relative to enforcement and monitoring since the inception of this RUE. And I have received full disclosure from the city, and I didn't see any annual reports or any reporting on maintenance, and I couldn't find any record of bonding. So I guess one of the commissioners expressed concern that we really need to do some follow-up and track if monitoring is occurring. And I also would ask Mr. Bennett if I could have that report from April. I didn't see that in the materials at all. And I also want to ask if the planning department does have some sort of tracking or tickler system on when the annual reports are due, and how much follow-up has occurred when they haven't been filed. Because just looking at this one situation, it looks like that there really were issues on enforcement. And we want to be partners with the city. So if it's a matter of lack of budget, if you need advocacy before the council, or if we can help with a grant writing, please reach out, because again, this is a critical issue for all of us. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. Appreciate the opportunity to comment.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else?
I'll comment briefly. I'm
Right.
John Brew from the,
Just one moment. Can you hear Ashton and Walter? Okay, would you mind coming a little?
I'm John Brew. I'm also from the Stewardship Foundation, and I'm a newbie to this process. So I was very happy to see tonight that it's evident that the Planning Commission and the Planning Department work together in the memo that you're doing. I'm happy to see that there's going to be enforcement in the future, and there's something that goes against the deed. That's a very good step as well. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anybody else? Speak now or hold your peace until October. All right, we'll close citizen comments. Our agenda for the next meeting will most definitely start with new business. And I think we may restrict our conversation entirely to that, unless one of you emails me and says you feel like we need to discuss anything else. All right. Okay, which takes us to our last and favorite item. Walter, I'm going to give you the opportunity.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilmember Bodie, have safe travels. Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Excellent. It was so wonderful to see you, and I will see you next month.
Good job, Maddie.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.